What is up, guys? Rick Kakas here, and today I am very excited to be showcasing some brand new Anthem gameplay. I guess you could say exclusive to me, as I'm the one playing in the background. Now, I was able to play and capture Anthem at an event in Sweden last month because I'm an EA game changer, so thank you to EA for providing for my flights and accommodations. Now, there is just so much Anthem stuff I want to show and talk to you guys about. If you're interested in this game, definitely keep an eye on the channel and press that bell button, because the subscribe button does nothing these days. In this video, we're going to be focusing, firstly, on gameplay from the mission Lost Arcanist. But I also really want to focus on what I'm playing this mission as, the javelins I'm using. I was able to play Lost Arcanist both as a Storm and as a Ranger. I'm going to be talking about both of those quite a bit. So let's get started. The one thing I do want to mention is that this is an earlier build of the game. Your experience in the final build and even in the demo builds may be a bit different, so keep that in mind. Firstly, what exactly is going on with this Lost Arcanist mission? Well, you're tracking down Matthias, who is, as you probably guessed, an Arcanist. An Arcanist in the world of Anthem are essentially like scientists. They're the ones that research the world and try to figure out what the heck are going on with these Shaper relics. The world of Anthem is totally enveloped in mystery. No one knows who created these Shaper relics, what all of them do, what they're for. They just know they're extremely powerful. And it's the Arcanists who are trying to answer those questions. The mission itself takes you to his last known position, an old Arcanist base, but unfortunately you're going to encounter some Scar resistance. Scar's one of the enemy factions within Anthem. You eventually find your way into this massive hidden ruins within this cave system, fight off a ton of enemies, and rescue Matthias. Once you do, he is going to become a pivotal character within Anthem. You can interact with Matthias in Fort Tarsus, collect missions from him, and so much more. But now, let's talk about the javelins, or the classes I was utilizing. Firstly, the Storm. This guy is definitely a caster. You are utilizing your abilities all the time. Frankly, in most engagements, you are utilizing your abilities more often than your weapons. And the abilities I had access to are, firstly, a lightning bolt attack. I would press a button and a lightning bolt would come down from the sky and do phenomenal damage. It frankly one-hit killed most normal enemies and did really good damage against the more powerful guys. Not only was the damage great, but the area of effect was pretty substantial as well, making it very good for clearing out groups of lower tier adds, especially if you hit a spawn point. You are just massacring enemies with this ability. Then I had a Seeking Ice Spike projectile attack. The ice spikes were really good. Interestingly, they're not a one and done ability like the lightning strike, but rather you actually have ammo, 10 rounds, and you can spread a couple rounds to the left, move over to your right, fire a bunch of rounds into a big guy. Let's say you have one left and hit that last sniper up on the ridge. Now, it's not necessarily going to kill all of those guys, except if you're putting multiple rounds into the lower tier enemies, but most importantly, it's freezing them quite often. So even though, again, you may not kill that sniper on the ridge, he's going to be frozen solid, not shooting you, and very vulnerable to any other follow-up attacks. Maybe it's your lightning bolt, maybe it's just your weapon, maybe it's your ally's ability, or maybe it's comboing with any of those things. Once an enemy is frozen, if you add some sort of explosive damage, is mainly the source that's going to trigger that combo, you're going to get a bunch of extra damage for that combo of the ice exploding. So a mortar pod from a Colossus on your frozen enemies, and they're going to be destroyed. Now, it should be noted that every class has its own unique melee attack. For the Storm, you kind of spin around, teleport a bit, and then hit someone with an elemental blast. It doesn't do anything phenomenal, and I definitely didn't spec into it with my playthrough. Then we have the ultimate ability, and ultimate is really the best word for this ability because it's ultimate AoE, ultimate damage. It's just ultimate. you call down essentially 3 different elemental meteors, 3 different elemental blasts, and for each one of these blasts, you can move around where the target actually is, where you are going to put forth that damage. So you can electricity blast a certain area, those guys get hurt, those guys are dead. Okay, fire blast more to the left, then you've got the ice blast, and then you finish everything off, everything detonates, everything dies, and against a boss, of course, you don't have to move it around. You can do fire, then ice, then electricity, then finish it off with the big blast, all on one guy, and the damage is truly incredible. The balancing factor is that it takes a while to set up, so you are vulnerable when you're trying to aim this ability, and quicker enemies can sometimes get out before the meteors hit. The Storm not only has unique abilities, but it has unique mobility as well. When you're flying, you can dodge and you will teleport essentially through the sky and appear a little bit more to the left or to the right to avoid incoming fire. You can also do that kind of when on the ground. You can jump up and then hover around and dodge that way. Now, speaking of the hover, that's actually one of the most important features of the Storm. When you're hovering, you actually get access to your shield, and when you're on the ground, you don't. So you want to be hovering constantly. You want to be utilizing your attacks from the air on enemies. Not only is it going to give you a better angle when bringing in your lightning strikes and so on, but it also makes you harder to kill. Frankly, that's one of the most unique features about the Storm and this game in general, is that there are big differences in just how these classes play. When you're playing the Storm, you are constantly trying to be in the air, trying to hover as much as possible to keep your shields up and to use your abilities to their best degree. But with the Ranger, because you don't necessarily get a bonus for hovering, it is a little bit dangerous being up into the air, and so you're often darting to the ground, moving from the ground to a higher position, and so on. They play very differently, and it's fascinating. In fact, speaking of which, let's move on and talk about what the Ranger Javelin had going on. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, low-key, I think the Ranger might be one of the best classes in Anthem, but because it's that starter class, a lot of people are going to ignore it. Its abilities are super versatile, and it's such a solid class to play. Firstly, you have access to a grenade. It's just a normal grenade. You can hold it and see where it's going to land. You can just press the button and it's going to throw out right away, but it does a pretty reasonable amount of damage. We're talking maybe a little bit less than lightning strike, and it has a pretty decent area of effect. It does what you would expect a grenade to do. When you are battling those more powerful enemies, the grenade is going to be your best damage dealing option. Your second option, or at least the second option I had access to, was a homing missile. I really like this ability. It truthfully doesn't do that much damage. It's going to one-shot kill the low tier enemies, but that's about it. However, its spam ability is amazing. You just get to shoot it off all the time. Every time you shoot it, it's gonna hit something. Whether that's killing a low tier ad or flinching a higher tier ad. So even though, again, it won't do that much damage, those guys with the massive shields in front of them, they will recoil backwards, allowing you to follow up with perhaps a grenade or usually your weaponry. And then for your melee ability, you whip out an electric stick and smack people with it. It does pretty much what you would expect. And your ultimate ability is truly one of the most devastating and versatile ultimate abilities in the game. You lock on to any enemies in front of you. When you hold the super button, you're going to, or press it, you're going to have a new heads up display pop up, and it's going to start locking onto everyone in front of you. So if there's a ton of low tier enemies, you'll start to see all these red dots appear, beep, 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 like locking onto them all. If there's just one boss in front of you, you lock onto just him, and then when you release that ability, it's going to shoot a volley of missiles. Now the best part is that the volley is pretty much the same whether it's one target or multiple targets, so you can wipe out a horde of lower tier enemies or focus your entire volley on just the one boss, and either that's going to be phenomenal for DPS, it does do fantastic damage, or phenomenal for ad control. It does what you want when you want it to. Now in terms of mobility, the Ranger is quite average. It does have a dodge ability. When you're flying, you will just roll to the right or to the left, or if you kind of jump into the air, you can just dodge one time to the right, to the left, whatever. It's definitely faster than something like the Colossus, not as fast as something like the Interceptor. It's very much in the middle, it's very much average, but sometimes average is what you want, especially when you are in certain situations when the Storm is trying to hover and maintain its shields and get good angles. Not gonna lie, you are quite vulnerable up in the air with zero cover, and you can get hit by a boss, by a powerful enemy, by a sniper, and suddenly you're in trouble. With the Ranger, because you don't have to do something like that, because you don't have to rely on your hover to get your shields, you can hide behind a rock if it suits you. You can hover if it suits you. You can do what you want when you want to do it, and the versatility is very, very, very good on this class. Now, although we didn't have access to it in this gameplay, both of these classes also have support abilities. For the Storm, you can put up a wind wall that lets you shoot through it and your allies, but enemies can't shoot you back through it. And for the Ranger, you have an ability where you put down kind of a sphere. Anyone standing inside in terms of yourself or allies will have their abilities charge a lot faster. Great for just, pairing up actually with a Storm. You can spam lightning strikes for days. In fact, speaking of skills, what you've seen in this gameplay are not the only options for either of these two javelins. For example, with the Storm, there are more alternatives to the ice spikes in that slot. Now, some of you may be wondering, why all this emphasis on abilities? Heck, Khaki Boy, you haven't even talked about the weaponry. And that's true, and weapons are still an integral part of the loot system. We may expand on them in a separate video, but the reason I'm really going in hard on abilities is because Anthem is a much more abilities-focused game than something like, for example, Destiny. Your abilities charge very fast. Even the non-caster classes, like the Ranger, is able to shoot off his homing missile and throw his grenade quite often. Like, within a 30-second time frame, you're probably using both of those abilities. It's truly insane. And although weapons are by no means useless, and you'll see me get many kills in the background gameplay with weapons, abilities are really the thing you're going to be using so much more in Anthem when compared to other games within this genre of loot-based shooter. Now, in terms of my overall feelings towards Anthem, I generally enjoyed it. I'm definitely going to have a separate video breaking down all of my feelings and the positives and the negatives I see within this game, but in this video focusing on the classes, what I want to communicate is just how different it feels to play these different classes within Anthem. The Ranger plays so different from the Storm, from the Colossus, from the Interceptor, and it's a big breath of fresh air, frankly, within this design space. It's also really awesome to see the big differences in mobility between these classes. Like we've said with the Storm and the Ranger, they dodge differently. The Storm gets benefits for hovering, whereas the Ranger doesn't really. In terms of dodges, the Colossus doesn't even get a dodge and will in fact just bring out a shield to protect itself, whereas all the way to the Interceptor where it has 3 dodges in a row. Really mobile, and you can basically dodge around an entire area without ever technically flying, but still keeping off the ground. There is vast differences within these different classes without ever having to use an ability, and that's one of the best parts. Now that's really it for what I wanted to cover in this video. I've got a couple more minutes of Anthem gameplay I can show, so I'm just gonna let that run and I'll see you guys at the end of the video.
Let's see to those scars.
You got it.
We got some scar heavies. Could use some help. Look out! Here it is, but it looks dangerous.
Rust Reaver. The thing's name is Rust Reaver. I don't care what its name is. That thing just isn't done. What the hell?
The scar leader's down. Let's clean up the rest of them now, shall we? Scars out of the way. Someone check.
And so guys, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed and found this interesting. If you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Anthem content similar to this, don't be afraid to slap that subscribe button. If you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below. Again, hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.